Today is September 12th. 2 days ago was September 10th. You probably figured that out on your own. But also 2 days ago was the emphasis for World Suicide Prevention Day. It was the day out of the year that was chosen to highlight the need to put an end to suicides. Are you aware that one of the most popular sites in America for people to commit suicides is Golden Gate Bridge? It has gotten so bad that up until 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, there were an average of almost one every day of people jumping off of Golden Gate Bridge. When I went out there 9 years ago, there were signs at both ends saying, if you're here to commit suicide, please call this emergency number. It's sad how prevalent that idea is today. Did you know that suicide is the number 2 cause of death for Americans between the ages of 10 and 34? Their lives are so empty, they're so tired, they're so meaningless to them that the number 2 cause of death is suicide. Number 1 is just unexpected events like automobile accidents. But the one primary way that's not an accident, they choose to end their life. Why did they get that way? One reason is the focus of today's message. Depression leads many people to the brink, to the edge, where they want to end their lives. I know for some Christians, the whole subject matter of depression is like something that relates only to those other people, that it's not really real. I'd like for us to take a moment now to look at some of the misunderstandings that even Christians have towards depression. One is that depression is not real. People just do it for the fun of it or do it to get out of things. Another popular statement is that depression itself is a sin. I've never understood that. How does someone focus and commit that sin when it's a result of other matters? So some people conclude depression is a punishment from God because you have sinned. Another statement is being depressed means you're failing to trust God. Others, being depressed means you're failing to be joyful in all things or to give thanks to God. And then some people say depression will go away if you just pray hard enough or you have enough faith. This is more popular than you might believe. Another one is depression is just an excuse for laziness or not doing your Christian duty. And this is a slight change from that, but many of you old enough in years may remember a guy named General George Patton. When he was leading his troops through Sicily towards Italy, one time he stopped at a hospital to check on his men to show compassion. He found 2 of them who were having severe mental problems because they were under the onslaught of shelling and the bombings and looking left and right constantly to check to see if someone's out to kill them. They became mentally disturbed. Patton slapped 2 of them in the face as hard as he could, saying, "You're just trying to get out of the war." That was not true. But another statement that I have heard Christians say, if not by their words, at least by their actions, it is this: if you have mental issues, then you must not even be a Christian. Because somehow or another, Christians are totally void of all that, and it's such a sinful thing, it must be associated with non-Christians. This, unfortunately, needs, like every other lie, needs to end on planet Earth. And I want to look at the Bible, to look at what does God say. We're not looking at what secular psychologists have said. We're not looking at the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic. We're starting with the true source. What does God say about this topic? So would you open your Bibles, if you don't have them there already, to 1 Kings chapter 19. I remind you, in the previous chapter, we have Elijah who has been to Mount Carmel. He has been there all day long, all morning, all afternoon. He had a long waiting period because he's waiting for the prophets of Baal to cry to their God to bring fire down from the sky, and it never happened. You could say to a point Elijah was getting bored. Maybe he was. But he was human, so I have no clue what percentage of him he might have been anticipating. My turn's coming up. Is God actually going to bring fire down from heaven? Now, it's possible it was at least 99%. Maybe he was 100% confident. I don't know, but there's this little bit of, what's going to happen? And my little bit of is more than we might think. He has breathed in his breath of anticipation of what's going to happen all day long. Because it's more than just, is fire going to come down? What's going to happen afterwards? So this anxiety, this adrenaline rush that's coming into him, what's going to take place? I'd actually like for you to look at the last two verses of chapter 18. Because this concludes his time there on Mount Carmel. It says, in a little while, the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy shower. And King Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Then verse 46, then the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to Jezreel. And just in case you've never noticed that passage before, let me repeat it. Elijah outran Ahab. Now, Ahab is not walking, he's not running, he's in a chariot. Elijah is so pumped up and so full of adrenaline, he was able to race faster than the horse. I mean, David had his moments of being so full of adrenaline, he leaped over walls and stated that in some of his Psalms, how he had feet like hinds' feet and was able to leap. He's so full of adrenaline. It continues. Let's go to chapter 19, verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and even more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. That's a fancy long way of saying, Elijah, I'm out to kill you by tomorrow this time. So think of the emotions, all the excitement. We have this great moment on Mount Carmel. Fire comes down from heaven. God proves himself to be the biggest and the one and only God. And then all of a sudden, he's told by God to kill the 450 prophets. He's getting all excited. Revival is breaking out. This is awesome. But soon afterwards, he hears, Jezebel is out to kill you. I mean, all of a sudden, from an extreme high to an extreme low, but his adrenaline is still up there. It continues now. Let's look now at verse 3. Elijah is running for his life. It says, he was afraid and rose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. We have the northern nation of Israel here and the southern nation of Judah here. Elijah spent the bulk of his time up here with Israel, but now that he's running away, he's running at Beersheba. He's at the southernmost point of the kingdom of Judah. And as we see in the next few verses, that doesn't stop him. He continues to run all the way down to Midian. But while he's there, he thinks, maybe I'm far enough away from all those chasing me. So look what happens in verse 4. Elijah himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Now this is even beyond Beersheba. A day's journey. And came and sat down under a juniper tree. His adrenaline is now over. Every time he stopped in the previous days, he's like, I need to keep going. They might catch up with me. This is his first time to get so far away, he goes, maybe I can crash. And that he did. For as he is under the juniper tree, he requested for himself that he might die. And you might be asking, Elijah? I thought he was a godly man. I mean, we didn't think any believers ever had any mental problems. Certainly not. But we do. In fact, just for the side moment, everyone in this room has mental problems, including myself. But let's go back to the lesson here. It says, he said, I might die. He said, it is enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers. A little hint right there in that phrase, I am not better than my fathers. So what happened here? He's been running on adrenaline, literally running on adrenaline for the last day or two or three. And now for the first time, he goes, and when he does, he crashes emotionally, which explains everything that he's going through. He simply had emotional exhaustion. You know, other people experience that. Remember David when he cried out with his Psalm 42, and he says, why are you downcast, O my soul, and why are you discouraged within me? Hope thou in God, and you shall yet praise him. Such a great statement in verse 5. The whole chapter is only 11 verses, and at the very end of 11, he still says the same thing. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why are you discouraged within me? You would think, well, maybe it ended at the end of chapter 42, but it doesn't. The next psalm says the same thing. For the third time, David is repeating himself, oh, why are you so discouraged and downcast, O my soul? Hope there in God. David experienced depression. What about Jonah? When he sat down in a tent, and all that took place in Nineveh had ended, and he rested, and his emotions crashed, it was at that moment he said, kill me, God. What about Jeremiah? Perhaps a guy who experienced the deepest and lowest level of depression. He says in one chapter, God, you have deceived me. You are a deceptive brook. Now, he's the preacher of the day. Can you imagine Billy Graham saying something like that? Truthfully, we've probably all said something similar. Jeremiah is so down and so low, he said, you're like a deceptive brook, nothing more than a mirage. I was full of thirst, and as I looked over the horizon of the desert, I thought I saw what was water. But when I came to you, God, there was only emptiness. You are nothing but a mirage. Jeremiah said, I wish I had been killed before I had been born. Would you say he was a little bit depressed? And then even Moses, he had his moments of anxiety. Remember, at the end of his life, he's saying, God, I can't take it anymore. These people are just all around me, constantly hitting me with these crazy, silly, and angry remarks. Even a few months after his birth, he showed he had mental problems. He was a basket case in denial. We are all like Moses or Jeremiah or Jonah. But when we come to the full understanding of depression, I wouldn't be surprised if Jesus had been depressed as well. Because our definition to put in your bulletin is emotional exhaustion. This is not the only cause for depression, but I would say it's the primary one. And Jesus spent more energy than any of us ever could while he was on the cross. The people for whom he came to die were the ones who put him on the cross. He wanted all of us to become Christians, and instead, as he comes to earth, we put him on the cross. I mean, all the emotions that went with that situation. He had to have been drained. I would like to compare this to a situation I had when I was about 17 years old. The first car I purchased was a 1970 Camaro. Drove it to work, drove it back home, drove it to school, drove it back home. Then all of a sudden, something weird happened and the engine began to race. And I would come up to a car in front of me, I would literally pull on the steering wheel as hard as I could and press on the brake as hard as I could to keep it from crashing into the car in front of me. I was so young, I didn't know what was going on. I just figured I had to endure this the rest of my life. And I know some people are more get the problem solved, but I just couldn't take it anymore. Every day and the only thing I could do to rest was to put it into neutral. But that only made the engine rev even higher. Then put it in drive, I had to have my foot on the brake, and it would take off. I finally found out later, after my accident, that the accelerator pedal got stuck so it wouldn't release and come back. God didn't, or engineers did not design for cars to sit at a red light and race the engine. And neither does God design human beings to race their emotions all day long. Oh no, what's going to happen? Oh no, we lost our job. Oh no, where are we going to get money? Oh no, where's all this stuff? Oh no, what's going on with my life? Oh, the anxiety. When we run our emotions longer than God designed, you will eventually crash. And that's called depression. For the most part, that's all it is. I know there are other godly people who know other godly reasons for why depression takes place, but that is the number one reason. You've been running your engines, your emotional engines, for too long. You can't even sleep at night. They're still racing and running, worrying, stressing, anxiety, whatever it is. And you can't rest. God wants us to experience peace. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a soldier and you're out fighting. I mean, it is common knowledge that if you're going to go on a beach and attack it, that you shell the beach for several days, nonstop, every minute, every hour, for days, to drive the people mentally crazy. They don't know where it's coming next. They can't rest. Their anxiety is up nonstop. Obviously, even Christians can have mental problems with all that stress. I've even been told that women are very excited about the birth of a child. And their emotions run for so long that sometimes after birth they have a depression. Why? Because they're not Christians? No, they just ran their emotional engines too long and they just simply crash. Charles Spurgeon is probably the most notable case of someone having depression. It hit him badly, often. In fact, the next issue of the association's newsletter is going to tell a lengthy story of one of our own pastors who crashed about 3 years ago and went through a bad case of depression. But because he went through the right steps, he was able to get back up on his feet. So we've learned now that a common cause for depression, what's written on your bulletin does not say the cause, it simply says a common one for depression is emotional exhaustion. I will say that I don't reach depression, but Sunday mornings are definitely the most emotionally draining time for me. I come to church, are the lights on, air conditioning set, oh yeah, we have a class in the back, or the lights on, the tables, oh, the tables aren't in the right direction, okay, A dog barks. Oh, let's see, the window's open. The constant anxiety for all day for Sunday, when I leave here, it's like, I go down. Now, if it lasted for days, I would have depression, but at least I can endure, I guess, one day of all day stress and anxiety for this. We all have these moments, but I now want to move to a new topic. We've looked at what is a common cause. I want us to look now at how can we benefit? How are we to get help for this? Before we look at a cure that's listed in the passage, I want to look at some misunderstandings that are out there. If you want to be confused, then just go on the internet and look up how to get help over depression. After the 1,000th story that you've read that's different, you get to be confused. Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, consider the two best, don't even agree, and their arguments are it's so confusing. But you could go to even some of the bookstores. Why, our own publisher has one that is an excellent book that covers something similar, Building Your Self-Worth. But certainly, if that's not exactly what you need, the same publisher is providing Breaking the Cycle of Hurtful Family Experiences. This is another good helpful, but if that one doesn't help, then another one would be life support, especially for your family, so that you can go through this entire course just to help other people in your family. But if that one doesn't help, certainly you might want to go to another one called Family and Friends to teach you how to go through the proper steps to help. Well, that might not be enough either. How about Making Peace with Your Past? That's another one to help you with help for adult children of dysfunctional families. I mean, you can get a lot of good stuff from it, but that one probably doesn't cover it all either. Now you can do Conquering Chemical Dependency. 12 steps to overcome that. Well, yep, you can do that one too, but, well, this is getting interesting. Okay, but sexual abuse. So certainly you can go through a 13-week course for that one to go over the depression too. And then, okay, another one with Family and Friends and Breaking the Cycle. There are so many groups out there. And then you go to one church, and here's their program for getting help. And here's an entire page. If you have a problem with anger, go to room 306. If you're a man, if you have a problem with anger and you're a woman, it's room 305. Chemically addicted men in the worship center. Chemically addicted women, 411 room. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Is life really this complicated? That if you bite your nails, you have to go to room 822 because your 12 steps to get over depression is different? We're going to look at what God has shown in the Bible. We're looking at what God has said. So would you now look at verse 5? What happened? Here's this guy, the man of God, the prophet, who is going through severe depression. He's saying, God, just kill me. I've had it. A cure for depression begins with sleeping and eating. Believe it or not, hang on, sleeping, and I know what some of you are thinking. You want to have depression intentionally so that the doctor will prescribe to you sleeping and eating. But that doesn't work. So let's go to verse 5. Elijah lay down and slept under a juniper tree. And behold, there was an angel touching him, and he said to him, Arise, eat. Then he looked, and behold, there was at his head a baked cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise, eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. So what's the point here? We've already said that a common cause of depression is emotional exhaustion. So the sleeping and eating accomplishes only one thing. It allows you to calm down from the depression. It at least gets your engine from racing for a while to calm you down. That's all it does. Now let's move to point 2. Point 1 for the cure is sleeping and eating. Point 2 is in verse 8, which says, seeking the Lord for truth. What is causing the engine to race? That's where we need to go. You can put your engine into neutral all you want, and boy, that'll calm you down. Boy, you don't have to press on that brake pedal anymore. But it's not getting rid of the engine racing. We need to find out what's the cause. So verse 8, seek the Lord for truth. So Elijah arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. It is amazing, but it is so true. When our engine is racing, it's because we have believed lies. The solution is to go to the Lord. That's not a religious, preachy statement. It is the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus said of his own Heavenly Father, every word he says is true. The Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth who leads us and guides us into truth. What about everything they say? Jesus said, your words are truth. We go to God for truth, not the internet, not the doctors, even though they may be helpful. We first go to the Lord. And here, Elijah, as much of depression as he is in, has enough sense and awareness to know, go to the Lord. He is my help. Not necessarily church, even though that can be a part of the process, but the real hope is in God himself. Horeb, that is the other name for Mount Sinai. Can you imagine? This is before cars and buses and airplanes and trains and boats. He went the entire distance from the northern area of Israel, through Judah, through the other area, and where I believe Mount Sinai is, all the way down in Midian. He's traveled that entire distance. Why? To seek the Lord. Such a huge point that is. In fact, this is the only time in the Bible that you will hear about Mount Sinai or someone going to Mount Sinai other than the time Moses and the Israelites were there. It's the only time. And Elijah is saying, if I really want to hear from the Lord, I need to go all the way back to the mountain of God. Well, let's look at what happens next. In verses 9 through 18, we pick up Elijah's situation. I want you to emphasize this was Elijah's situation. Whatever God says to Elijah is not necessarily how God is going to speak to you, because your situation is different each time. So in Elijah's situation, let's go to verse 9. Then he came there to a cave and lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. That's what you want, the word of the Lord, to present truth. And God said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Now, you have to admit that's a little bit comical, but at the same time, that's the way God is. He doesn't say, well, you have third-level depression, you need this, clinical this and that, and you need this medicine. He doesn't do that. He asks him a question so that Elijah can see his own lies. Remember when God went to Adam and Eve, he didn't say, oh, I see you ate of the tree. He didn't do that. He said to Adam, where are you? He asked him a question to force him to answer. A great way to draw truth out of people is to ask questions. So the Lord asks him, what are you doing here, Elijah? As if to say, your job is back up in Israel. What are you doing all the way down here at Mount Sinai? To which he says, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. I want us to look at this phrase and try its answers and try to break it down. What are the lies that he's believed? Let's start off with the most obvious. I'm calling this one number 2. He says, I'm the only believer. Now, today we would say we're the only Christian, but back then there were no Christians, they were believers. I'm the only believer. So what is it about that that's bothering him? It's like, I'm all alone. I'm just against everybody. That is a very common belief today when people go through painful situations. They easily believe a lie such as, I'm all alone. And if you really believe that, not just in your head, but experientially, it'll drive you crazy. Can't imagine what hell's going to be like for people in the future. That will never end for them. They will always be alone. Let's look at the third one in there at the end of verse 10. He says, I'm going to die. Now you need to understand, God says truth will set you free. So if the statement is true, that's not what's bothering him. It's something attached to it. I don't want to experience the pain associated with dying. That's a different picture now. Now, what it was for him, we don't know. But the third thing is he thinks he's going to die. For he said, they seek my life to take it away. But notice the wording. Satan will make you word it in such a way you can't see what the lie is. Well, of course they're coming down. That's a truthful statement. But what is it that you believe? You're going to die. You're going to go through some painful agony as they are in the process of killing you. What is it that you really believe? And I want us to go back to the first one. When he says, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. I don't know what he's saying, but here are some of my guesses. Those Israelites need to stop sinning. Well, actually, that's a true statement. But what is he really saying? They won't change. Now, be honest. Have you parents ever gotten upset because your kids won't do right? Guess what? It's their choice. And if you understand it, it won't drive you crazy. So what's the real issue? I must change them. Wrong. And we pastors are guilty of that. We finish our greatest sermon. We preach our hearts out. Those people won't change. That's not your responsibility. A pastor's responsibility is to give the message and back off. And then say, God, sick 'em. And if God chooses not to, that's God's choice. If other people are sick, then they have the choice to change. It's their choice. But when you finish leading a Bible study or preaching a sermon, if you understand truth, other people have the freedom. And by the way, you say you don't teach a class. Well, I'll tell you what, a bunch of people violate this when they witness. But you need to become a Christian. But you need to. Why? Because I got to prove to the people that I can tell someone about Jesus too. Because I've led only 4 people to the Lord today, and if I got to get my 5th one, I got to notch the 5th one in. I'm putting pressure on. That's ungodly. But when I speak and back off and say, I've done my part, God, now you take over. God is able to do so much more. And somehow Elijah in this seems to be saying, I should be the one to be able to do something. Didn't he say earlier that I'm not greater than my fathers? As if to say, I thought I could do it. He's trusting in himself. That'll drive you crazy. Trusting in yourself. You do what you're supposed to do, and then you say, I'm through, God, with that project. What do I do next? And you do what God has said. Let's go on to verse 11. Something interesting happens now. So God said, and remember, he just asked the question, what are you doing here? And he answers at least 3 different things. But look how God responds. Go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord was passing by, and a great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Here is a very important point for us to learn. God speaks to every person differently. In this case, Elijah experienced a presentation of God's answer. Sometimes God speaks to people in a dream. Sometimes people have just a visual. It's not an actual, I'm there next to this mountain and it's rumbling. But sometimes it's a visual, oh, wow, this is taking place. Sometimes God speaks just with an impression. It just comes to you. Oh, wow, I never realized that before. So you cannot say to other people, well, just have the same experience I had. No, we're all different. And we sometimes believe different lies, so God approaches it differently. So what is God saying to Elijah? My opinion is God is saying, Elijah, I know you wanted me to send fire down from heaven and make everybody change. But I'm not that way all the time. Yeah, I did bring down fire to destroy that or take that offering. And yeah, I did call you to sacrifice to 450. But that's not the way I am all the time. Isn't it easy for us sometimes to say, there's so much evil going on in this world today. If God would only... We're playing the same game. And God says, sometimes I don't work that way. Maybe God is saying to him, I actually want to give them another chance to become a believer instead of their being struck down. God is big and answers in totally different ways. But this is interesting. Now we come, somehow know that that was a barrier. Some people call it a stronghold. Some people call it I can't think of the word. It's a lie that's in front of the real lie. You know, the lie that says, oh, I want to go back to my pain or I might die. God tells the truth, you won't die. So you go through that and you go, oh, I'm not dying. And you respond to the issue. This lie that's out in front of you is keeping you from getting to something deeper. So apparently this initial exterior lie for Elijah is, he needs to just come in and destroy them or be powerful. And now that's been resolved. Let's go further. So we go to the next part. Behold, a voice came to him and said, I believe this is the last part of verse 13. Behold, a voice came to him and said the second time, what are you doing here, Elijah? And then he says, word for word. Then he said, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Now that this exterior lie has been removed, I wonder if he's able to see more of the truth even as he speaks it. I've seen that so many times. People will speak the truth and they go, oh, we don't need to explain it to them. They just said it. And now reality came to them. So sometimes God speaks to you by allowing you speak the truth and you say to yourself, oh, now I get it. Maybe you've been there. But look how God replies. Verse 15. The Lord said to him, I have a different way of attacking them than using an earthquake and a fire and wind. Go return you on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael king over Aram. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall come about the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death. What's God saying? He's saying, I have a plan. That should be good enough for Elijah. He's not saying, Elijah, you're a failure. He's not saying, by God, I'm a failure and I messed up. He's simply saying, I have my own plan. And it goes, oh, well, that should bring a lot of peace and calm. But now for the most obvious. Look at verse 18. God answers comment number 2. You're not the only one. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Isn't it amazing that when you go through difficulty, Satan has you say these dumb old lies? Oh, nobody knows what I've been through in my life. Come on, we've all probably had that same statement. Because if you can believe that lie, you can beat yourself up and pout and whine all you want to for the rest of your life. But the God of the universe has already said there's no temptation that has taken you that is not common to man. We've all experienced the same. Elijah's whining because he's the only believer in the whole wide world. And God says there are at least 7,000 more in Israel. To which he goes, oh, the engine is no longer racing. He's now able to listen to the Lord. But who knows? Maybe Elijah really did have a passionate heart for God. Maybe he sees the people and knowing that they're going to hell someday. And he really, really wants them to become a Christian. Well, you know what? That's not a lie. And your engine will never race on the truth. Lies will drive you crazy. But maybe a part of all going on in Elijah's life was he wanted to see people change. And God is saying, I'm in control. I will be raising up these other leaders, and they will take their part. In fact, Elijah, I'm going to have one of the guys you raise up to take your place. And another comical thing is, he said, God, would you please kill me? And God's answer was, no. And to this day, he still hasn't died. He's 2,500 years old, and he's still alive. I want you to see one more thing, verse 19, just the first few words. He obeyed the Lord. The first step towards overcoming depression is sleeping and eating. Calm down your engine for a while. Next, seek the Lord for truth. And this last one is huge. Once he tells you, obey him. It's amazing when you start doing what God says, it takes your mind off all these other matters, and it's like you come to peace. So verse 19, he departed from there, and he went on his way. He obeyed the Lord. Would you today seek the Lord for truth in every area of your life? Especially if your engine is running and you can't go to sleep at night, you're thinking of this, thinking of that. Seek the Lord. God will give you the answers the next day, but you spend all night long just focusing on how big God is, and you'll realize, I'm wasting my time to think of all my problems. God is bigger than everything.